All right, you're all set.
All set.
Okay. All right. If everybody's ready, I'd like to call to order the Tiverton Town Council meeting of Monday, June 22nd. And we'll start. John has our flag, so we'll start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The flag bearer is going to bed, though, unfortunately.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the
republic
for which it stands,
one
one nation,
under
God, indivisible,
with liberty.
liberty, justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you like to take a roll, please?
Counselor Hilton,
Present.
Counselor DiMederos, I think she's muted.
Present.
Harris, okay. Counselor Perry,
Present.
Counselor Driggs,
Present.
Counselor Cook,
Present,
Counselor Clark is absent at this time.
Counselor Edwards is also present.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. The consent agenda. Item A, approval of town council minutes, May 21st, special meeting, May 21st, executive session, May 29th, regular meeting, and June 16th, a special meeting. Item B, acknowledge receipt of minutes from boards, commissions, and committees. There are 3 sets from the planning board. Item C, acknowledge receipt of reports. 1 from the treasurer, Denise Surratt, the May budget and revenue reports. Number 2, police and fire overtime reports for May 2020. And finally, the department monthly reports for May 2020. Item D, acknowledge receipt of correspondence. 1, Hoffman Engineering report on town playground and right-of-way areas on Bay Street. Number 2, the town of Portsmouth resolutions. The first, condemning racist attacks and urging efforts to stop racism. The second, in support of funding the categorical for high-cost special education. And the third, in support of the inclusion of transportation under ESSA in the categorical fund for non-public transportation. And finally, urging continued appropriation of state and local revenues to support public education. Item 3, the town of Warren, a resolution in support of ending racial injustice. Item 4, Erica DeMello and neighbors request for no parking sign at the bottom of Kaufman Leppies Road. This has been referred to Chief Jones and the DPW Director Rogers. Item 5, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, aka FEMA, regarding the cancellation of previously approved floodplain maps. Item E, the scheduled public hearing on July 13th regarding rescinding the previously approved amendment to the Code Ordinance Chapter 67-2 Floodplain Management Program per the new FEMA requirement. Item F, approval of National Grid Verizon joint poll petitions, 1 on East Road and Crandall Road and the second on Crandall Road and Sandra Lee Lane. And finally, item G, authorization to advertise for the fire chief position. Would any counselor like to remove an item from the consent agenda? John?
D4.
D4. Nancy?
A3 and A4.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
A3 and A4.
A3 and A4. Okay. Anyone else? In that case, do I have a motion to accept the remaining items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos?
Yes.
Counselor Driggs?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
yes,
Counselor Perry?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, we'll go in order. Counselor Driggs, A3 and A4.
Yes. A3, I just wanted to bring to the attention, actually, under item 8G in those minutes, something, Trish, that you said at the end, and I just don't want to have it get lost, because I think we should maybe think about it. I don't know if it needs to get put on an agenda, but you wanted the town council to send a strongly worded resolution to the General Assembly asking them to do something about the police officers' Bill of Rights. And I think I think that would be something we should do. And I just wanted to bring that up and figure out how to make sure it happens.
Well, in that case, why don't we ask Madam Clerk to put that on the next agenda, and we can work with the solicitor on a resolution?
Okay.
And then A4?
A4, so I had a couple of things. The first, under 4A, that was the night that, remember, a whole bunch of us hadn't, I think most of us didn't get the complete copy of the House Bill 8015, and Assistant Solicitor DeCosta read it to us. I think it was the B section, and I know we have the complete copy now as background, but do you think it should be included in the minutes, the B section that he actually read? That's my first question. And then I guess I wanted to just clarify in the last paragraph, since there's a statement, since Rhode Island has continued state of emergency to July 13th. It's my understanding from what the solicitor said last week that as long as the state has called a state of emergency, we can have virtual meetings, like for the FDR public hearing. Is that correct?
For the public hearing, yes.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. And then finally, a small thing that we sort of cleared up. I actually didn't know how to spell his name, but I think we need to spell James Seveni's. I don't know how you say his name.
70.
It was spelled wrong in the minutes. I think we should just correct the spelling. Thank you.
So we can correct the spelling. We have a clarification. I'm going to defer to the solicitor on to whether or not we need to amend the minutes to reflect this section that Assistant Solicitor DeCosta read out loud.
I can
I
just
It
attach-
didn't
I
what?
can attach the legislation if you like.
why don't we just attach the full legislation then? Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
In that case, so that's a 4. John, you had D4.
Yeah, just really quickly on this one, included in D4 were a number of pictures, but I think they were printed off in black and white and then scanned in. I haven't the foggiest idea what they are of. So if there are color copies floating around, it would be nice to make sure that the police chief is in receipt of those, because I don't think he's going to be able to discern whatever it is these pictures are of. And
I
so
agree.
with that, I'll make a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yeah.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and Counselor Cook.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Public comments, we only have one and it relates to an agenda item a little bit later in the agenda, so I think I will save it till then. We don't have any public hearings, but we do have appointments and resignations. The first is a resignation from Richard Rahm from the Library Board of Trustees. Yes, John.
I'll make a motion that we accept with regret the resignation of Richard Rahm from the Library Board of Trustees and thank him for his service.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And then secondly, we have a resignation from Laura Rahm from the Tiverton Housing Authority.
Madam President,
Yes, John.
if I may, I'd like to make a motion to accept with regret the resignation of Laura Rahm from the Housing Authority and thank her for her service.
There's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And then for appointments,
Madam President, can I just make one comment?
Yes.
That, just so everybody understands, because I really want to thank the Roms for their amazing service and for so many things in the town of Tiverton, but they are moving to be closer to family out of Tiverton, which is why they're resigning.
Thank you, Counselor Driggs. We do have one request for reappointment for the Recreation Commission. It's a 7-member board, 3-year terms. There's one vacancy. And Rachel McGarty of 64 Cherry Lane has requested reappointment to expire April 15th, 2023. Denise?
I'd like to make a motion to waive our policy and appoint tonight.
Second.
Okay. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
yes,
Counselor Driggs?
Yes,
Counselor Clark? Steve?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Thank you. Counselor Cook?
Yes, yes,
And I'm a yes. Denise, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Rachel McCarty, 74 Cherry Lane, to the Recreation Commission, reappointment to expire 4/15/2023.
Second. And just correct the record, it's 74, I believe. I'm sorry, yeah, 64. You said 74, I just said 74.
What did I say?
Said 74, and then I said 74.
All right,
64.
64, John.
Okay, let the
Yeah, do
record
it too.
let the record note that we actually have the applicant's address correctly.
Yes.
Right. Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
yes,
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
yes,
Counselor Cook,
yes.
and I'm a yes. All right. So congratulations and thank you to Rachel for volunteering to serve again. Now that brings us as the Board of Licensing, the Groundswell Bakery and Cafe is requesting a continuance for approval of a BVL liquor license to the July 27, 2020 meeting. So, could I have a motion to continue that on behalf of the applicant?
So moved.
so
Second.
moved,
Okay. Counselor Perry?
Can I ask a question before you?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Mike?
Sorry, Nancy, Madam Clerk, because it's a continuance, are we going to have to re-advertise it, or we're just going to note in the minutes?
No, because there's a date certain, so we don't have to re-advertise.
Thank you. So just so we're going to continue it without advertisement, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Perry?
yes,
Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes,
Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos?
Yes.
Counselor Driggs?
yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes too.
My
So-
my video go.
So we will continue that item. General business, DPW Director Rogers requests authorization to, 1, amend the existing fiscal year 20 bituminous concrete crusher rental contract with AJ Potter and Sons to extend into fiscal 21 or negotiate an agreement with the contractor to continue to supply the service. 2, to purchase catch basin blocks and related items as outlined in bid specifications based on reviewing available MPA pricing or requesting prices from suppliers on an as-needed basis. And 3, to re-advertise for bids for tub grinding services based on a quantity basis instead of an hourly basis. Chris, I don't know if Rick is here or if you want to go over this item for everybody.
I am here. This is Rick Rogers.
Hi, Rick.
Hi, and I'm happy to go over these items. No bids were received for the bituminous concrete crusher rental. So we have, for instance, in July 2018, when no bids were received, we simply, my understanding is negotiated. That was a month before I got here, but my understanding is we negotiated a contract with the existing contractor and extended it. But I don't know legally whether or not, and that's something Michael could let us know, whether we should simply extend the contract or simply negotiate a new agreement, because there's nothing in the existing contract that allowed for definitive contract extension.
Did he bid on did he submit a bid in this last one or not?
No.
No one did, Michael.
Okay. So, under that, scenario, I guess we're gonna call it almost, yeah, I think we should try to negotiate a new contract with him based upon, at this point, he's a sole source provider, even though when we send it out the bid, we have no other choice but to go to the person that's doing, unless you want to send it out the bid again, but it's up to your choice. I would recommend trying to do a short-term 1-year contract, if that's okay.
Denise?
I don't know if sorry, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. So you said there was no bid. So does that mean AJ Potter and Sons did not bid?
Right, Denise,
Why didn't
they
bid?
they were the existing bidder in fiscal year 20, but because of an oversight on my part, I did not put a contract extension clause. Unlike the other 11 we did maybe a few weeks ago, there was no contract extension clause. So we had to re-advertise, but nobody bid it. It's not a lot of people around here have that kind of bituminous concrete crushing setup.
Is that including this company did not rebid?
There were no bids at all returned.
So why didn't they rebid? Because if they would have rebid, then they would have been our only contract and we could have just appointed them.
How I
Right.
would answer that is they were, their bidder was too busy to bid, but DPW has been very satisfied with their work and their price. But I did contact them. There was not a lot of lead time on this particular set of bids, and they did not have the time to bid it.
Well, that concerns me because do they have the time to do the job?
Yes, it's just that they have personnel to do the work. It's just that one of their owners is the bidder, and he was tied up.
Okay.
Mike?
So my suggestion, and Chris can weigh in, my suggestion is that if they are willing to continue this current bid for at least another year at the same price, unless you can get a lower price, that'd be obviously great, Rick. But if they're willing to continue this current contract at the same price, the town should probably do that since nobody bid. And it doesn't look like anyone else will bid anyway. So I'm okay with that based upon the fact that we did send it out to bid and we have a current existing contract.
We'll call him this week.
And then second, purchasing catch basin blocks and related items as outlined in bid specifications based on reviewing available MPA pricing or requesting prices from suppliers on an as-needed basis.
Yes, and my comment on that would be, again, no bids were received this year, no bids were received last year. It appears to me that the quantities that DPW uses for these specialty items are insufficient to warrant a supplier taking the time to bid it. So we would request that either we allowed to call around for the lowest price or use MPA pricing.
Denise?
Did we have to do any kind of motion on 9-1?
Well, I was going to wait to the end and
Okay.
try,
Okay.
if we agreed on all of them, to do them all at once.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, are you okay with that plan?
Yes.
Okay. And finally, to re-advertise for bids for tub grinding services based on a quantity basis instead of an hourly basis.
Yeah, and my comment on that, Trish, would be we weren't 100% satisfied with the production in fiscal year 20. So what DPW would like to do is reformat the bid instead of an hourly basis where it's hard to compare production to a quantity bid.
All right. In that case, does anyone have any other questions? In that case, do I have a motion to authorize the DPW director to proceed according to items 9A, 1, 2, and 3?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? There's a second. Okay. Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor D. Medeiros,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Mike?
I'm sorry, so thank you. Before we get onto item 9B, and I apologize to the council, particularly to the clerk and to you council president. So if I'm looking at the right agenda, it says discussion and possible vote for consideration of a town council ordinance. I believe is that related to the farmers market? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes.
Attention.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't say that on the agenda, and just saying an ordinance is pretty broad. So what I would suggest, you did get my memo, but what I would suggest, so you can have the discussion, but it will only be discussion only, that a motion be had that we amend this agenda, number 9B, discussion of possible discussion for consideration of a town council ordinance related to farmers markets.
Wait,
And it
you're
would be for discussion
suggesting we amend it tonight?
Yes, just, it's only for discussion only, under the open meetings law. you can
Oh,
only-
gotcha. All right.
Okay.
I,
And I apologize to both council persons. I didn't catch this. Nancy knows that I'm a stickler for detail, and I don't know how I missed this one. But anyway, so if you are interested in discussing the farmer's market ordinance that I sent a memo to you on, if you just make a motion that discussion for consideration of a town council ordinance related to farmer's market to amend this item to reflect that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we consider this to be time sensitive, or can we just move it to the next meeting?
Would it be up to the councilors? I have no idea.
I'm posing the question, is it time sensitive?
I mean, Counselor Driggs and Counselor Cook, this is your item.
Right. I didn't know there'd be a problem. I don't think it's time sensitive. It's for clarity and because it was like almost unfinished business last year, and I just wanted to clarify some items and see what we could do as a council. So I'd be fine.
Can we be sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but if we're going to start discussing the details, I would really like this amended agenda to reflect that we're going to discuss it.
Oh,
I
well,
agree.
no, it's okay if it's moved to the next meeting, Mike. That's all I'm saying. I don't see any reason why I can't.
You did get, the council should have gotten.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, so you're gonna wait and put this on the next agenda with a more detailed description for the agenda item for the clerk? Yes, Nancy?
I just do want to apologize on that. It looks like we didn't finish typing in that from our
Right.
discussion. It's really the clerk did not finish typing it in.
We share the blame, Nancy. I'm sorry. Thank you.
You
I
don't
thought-
have to make
I
it
don't-
blame me, Mike. That's really my mess up.
It had to be that because I would not have given the memo that I gave to the council had I known what the agenda item was. So that's why I was a little confused when I saw this on the.
Okay,
All
so
right, I'm just trying to figure, all right. So what's the problem? I'm trying to figure discussion and possible vote.
No, the problem is it says consideration of a town council ordinance and it doesn't tell us what the ordinance is. Could be anything.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, I see.
So I would ask that, based upon the scrivener's errors and the bad eyes of the city solicitor, that this be with the sponsor's approval, that this be put up forward on the next agenda with a better description.
right.
Yeah,
And just as a reminder for all the council, when you submitted an agenda item, Mike reviews them, so does the clerk, but it is a little bit, the onus is on us to make sure that in that subject of agenda request, there's enough accurate information that it wouldn't cause an OMA problem. Okay, so we're going to discuss this at the next meeting. Is that the consensus here of
Vote
the
and discussion. I mean, you have my memo. If the councils who sponsored this resolution want to try to make an issue, try to do what's recommended in my memo. Again, I don't want to get into the, please contact me tomorrow. We can get that process moving.
all right, Mike, I'll call you. I'll do that.
Great, thank you.
Actually, you know what, but before we get going on this, I'm going to actually, in that case, I'm going to make a motion to amend the agenda for purposes of discussion only to discuss the
An ordinance related to farmers markets.
Ordinance related to farmers markets
As it relates to zoning.
as it relates to zoning. Is there a second? Okay, in that case, Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
No.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
yes,
Counselor DiMederos,
No,
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. The reason that I have done this before we asked Mike to do a lot of work is that if you read this memo, there are two sort of components that come into play. One is that a farmer's market, which is not the same as a farm stand, a roadside farm stand that a farmer has, a farmer's market, in terms of zoning, is allowed by right, meaning you don't need zoning permission in the highway commercial or the general commercial. In the village commercial district, it requires a special use permit. So you have to go to the zoning board and get a special use permit. Additionally, there's a separate ordinance, which is not in zoning, it's in our regular ordinance code, that specifies the requirements that, for a farmer's market, not from a zoning point of view, but from a business point of view. A couple of weeks ago, and by the way, it's not that it can't be changed, but it's like this for a reason. And the reason that it requires a special use permit in the village commercial is that some of the farmers in South Tiverton who are very dependent on their farm stands for additional income were a little reticent about having farmers markets with produce from other places that they would have to compete with. So instead of making it a by right thing, you have to get a special use permit. And that was, to protect our local farmers who have their own farm stands down here, and some of them were, not thrilled about competition. And so that's why the zoning is that way. A couple of weeks ago, when we had the planner in front of us, this was one of the things that we asked the planner to look at. So before we asked Mike to start drafting, and changing the zoning ordinance, we've already given it to the planner to look at for her recommendation. And she might come back and say, yeah, I recommend you change it. Or she might come back and say, no, I don't recommend you change it because the way that it was structured in the beginning was for a good reason. So I'm not sure that I want to ask the solicitor to do work when we've already work. Steve?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate where I'm coming from when I suggested that we delay this and voted against it, is that it's not properly stated on the agenda. And I was told that it was not time sensitive, and here we are having a discussion about it. I would rather see this corrected, and 2 weeks from now, we make a motion and discuss it after the motion is made, to follow proper protocol. So that was just where I was coming from. I hear what you're saying, Trish, you have some very good input, but let's, do it through the proper steps.
I thought we were continuing it.
No, I made a motion to put it on for discussion because, as I said, I've already asked the planner to work on this. So I'm a little, I know that the solicitor is pretty busy. If we've already asked the planner to review the zoning on it, but we're going to ask the solicitor to work on potentially rewriting an ordinance, they may end up at different places. We have a planner for a reason. I think that I would like, before I'd be interested in hearing any ordinances, I'd rather hear from the planner because she's a professional. It's what she does. So, and we already voted. She was in front of us a couple of weeks ago with a list of, this is what I'm going to be working on. These are the priorities. Do you all agree? This was on the list and we said yes.
Okay, here's the problem. I don't have a date when she will be bringing this to us, and that's how things get lost in the weeds. We end up, weren't we talking about that 2 years ago, and nothing's done. So I would like to, if that's the case, and I understand what you're saying, Trish. I had this written up only because of the for clarification for what happened last year, and there didn't seem to be a remedy for it. And then, of course, the planner, I don't have any control over what she's going to bring forward. So we have two people trying to clarify what's going on down at the Village Commercial for this. I don't have a problem. Bless you. I don't have a problem with putting this off and putting it together. But when is the planner going to bring it forward to also include what Nancy and I are asking for?
Well, here's the I will ask you this question. What are you asking for? Because I can't, I'm just being honest. I don't know what you're asking for here.
Well, the problem last year, as I was doing the narrative, was that Mr. Botello seemed to get lost with various things going on with the town, and he seemed to lose his right to have a farmer's market. There didn't seem to be a building inspector, and there didn't be the paperwork wasn't given to him correctly. There was just various things going on that didn't add to him being able to even try to get what he needed. And then the next meeting was going to be till August for the zoning board for him to even put something in. So at that point, it was kind of moot. Most of the summer was kind of be over. So, and the town council, you know, there was a couple of counselors that said, we've done this in the past, we could do something. And then we were told, well, not really, we really need something written. So it's just for clarification. So if we could work with this, with the planner, that would be great. But, you know, we talking 4 months, 2 months, 6 months? Like when's that going to happen that she's going to come to us? That's my question.
Joe?
Yeah, my question is almost like Don. Would it be possible to ask the planner to review this before our meeting and give Mike any questions or concerns she may have so that we could have the next meeting rather than wait a month or 2 months?
Yeah.
We could, but we can do that. And that'd be changing this to a by right use in the Village Commercial, which I'm just letting you know, we'll need to go to the planning board for a recommendation because that's the requirement. And as I said, you know, when this was first done, there was a reason that it wasn't a by right thing. And we may get some of the same feedback from the same farmers, and understandably that's so it's a special use permit. But we can certainly ask Chris to ask the planner if she would look at this and come back with a recommendation. As far as the other things that went wrong with this application, I mean, that was just a series of errors and missteps that happened. That's not, I mean, as a council, we can hope those things don't happen again. We have a town administrator here who is, you know, doing a good job at, sorry about the barking, supervising, you know, supervising for us. And hopefully those kinds of mistakes, you know, won't happen again, but they're, you know, it's not something we can change with an ordinance. But could we ask Chris to?
I will most certainly speak to her.
Okay, Mike?
I don't want to belabor this because we'll wait for his recommendation, but I've done as much research as I possibly can. As the council president indicated, if you want to allow a farmer's market in that VC zone as a matter of right, you have to change the zoning code. Only the council can change the zoning code. So if after the planning director makes a recommendation, we can certainly draft an ordinance to change the zone. And then that ordinance automatically gets referred to the planning board, and then there's advertisement, they have a hearing, and then it comes back to the and because it's an amendment to a zoning code, there's a whole public hearing requirement. But you know, so I just want to make sure that it's clear that the only way that you can allow the farmer's market in the VC zone right now as a matter of right is to change the use table, which I mentioned in my memo.
So we're going to bring this back. We're going to ask the planner to come back to us. Yes, John?
So just to clarify, timeline wise, right, if we make a change to the zoning ordinance, it's going to go to the planning board, they're going to do their thing, then it's going to come back to us, we're going to do our thing. and it's winter by the time this is even going forward. Am I hearing that correctly, Mr. Solicitor?
I don't know if it's winter, but it's probably end of
Summer's
summer.
over at that point.
Yeah. But again, this is for the future too. So,
It's really for the future, John. It's,
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're not trying to do something for one specific person.
yeah,
No,
I'm not aware of any application that's pending for a farmer's market.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Denise,
It's generic right now.
Correct.
It's no specific person.
Correct.
Denise, did you have your hand up? Denise? No? Okay. All right. So Chris will let us know when the planner can take a look at this and have a recommendation for us. Okay. And, okay, this brings us to item C, discussion and vote on town council's options for continuation of fiscal year 20 appropriation and levy into fiscal year 21 per House Bill 8015 and Senate Bill 2864, and setting a public hearing date by town clerk at least 10 days prior to final adoption of tax levy and appropriation to be advertised. I'm going to let Chris and Mike lead this discussion. Well, why don't I let Mike explain legally, per that bill, legally what we need to do.
Okay. So let me start. So the bill, as was presented to you last week, has now passed the House and the Senate. It's on the governor's desk. It is not yet law, but we expect it to be law very soon. As we explained last week, you now have two options. You will have two options before you. One is to continue the last year's appropriation along with last year's appropriation for a period of time, not to exceed 1 year. And the purpose of that is to allow you this crisis to pass so that you can actually have an FTR, FTM, or wait for better information on an FTR, FTM. Or you can, as a council, pass a budget as a body and completely bypass the FTR, FTM, which was very clear from the very beginning that this council had no appetite to do so. And I don't think that's where you're going, but that is a legal option that you will have. However, before you take any other legal option, there's an advertising and public hearing requirement under this statute. And you have to decide what option you're taking. And then once you decide what option you're taking, you have to advertise for that public hearing. And it has to be at least 10 days before the action is taken. Because there is a potential cash flow issue with the town, and Chris can talk about this better than I can, we'd like the council to make a decision tonight as to what option they would like to use so that we can advertise the public hearing probably beginning this week. And so therefore, when the law actually becomes law, we'll be all set and it will be behind us, and you can go forward with the method that you so choose. So it's really the 10-day notice requirement now that we're coming up against, depending upon what option you do. So it's a 10-day notice requirement and a publication as well as a public hearing. And then after that public hearing, you formally adopt whatever provision you're taking.
Denise?
You're muted.
Denise?
You're muted.
Spacebar. This is the curse of Mike Marcello and the spacebar.
Chris, can you unmute Denise?
I'm trying.
There you go.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
now
there
we got
she
you.
is.
Okay.
All right, I think you clarified it for me, Mike, but I just want to have it straight in my mind. So this public hearing is so that the council can choose what option to go within
No.
the two options?
No.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I can't hear.
Mike, your audio is very wonky.
Yeah.
So let me try and clarify as best I can. Because this bill is written in such a way, because there are multiple municipalities who are asking for this, but they all have different processes. So I mean, not that we're going to, but there are some municipalities that are asked to say, look, we're just going to have our council set a budget. Or some municipalities that may be pushing their setting of a budget off for a very long time. So you can, as a municipality, look at this bill and pick. What we have always talked about, right, is that we would extend the current tax levy into the first quarter of next year. So in other words, the tax bill that you would get in July would be, based on the same tax rate, the same tax levy that we have now, and that would hold until October 1st. And by October 1st, we'll have had an FTR and everything else, and then you would get a tax bill for you pay them quarterly, but you get the 3 quarters with whatever the new tax rate is. So that's the option that we've considered. But because this bill offers multiple options, we have to pick the one that we're going with and vote that that's what we're going to do. Once we do that, then there needs to be a public hearing for the public to basically tell them, this is we're rolling the budget forward for a quarter and we're rolling the tax levy forward for a quarter. And it's to meet a requirement in the bill. So unless someone here wants to extend the budget for more than a quarter or extend the existing tax levy for more than a quarter, that's our option, but we need to formally vote on that to be compliant with the bill.
Or pass a budget. That's the other option.
And actually make this effective. We can't just say we're going to do it. We actually have to vote and say we're doing it.
Correct.
So,
Madam President, would the proper procedure be for somebody to make a motion and then have a discussion on what the motion represented?
I think that would be fine if somebody.
Okay. I move that we go with the rolling over the appropriations that were voted in by the people in the prior thing. In other words, go under A and continue the city town fiscal year appropriations assistance.
For one quarter.
Yes.
As well as the existing tax levy for 1 quarter.
So I think her motion is to adopt the procedure set forth in the statute under B1.
Correct.
I will second that motion.
Right, but
Do we have a bird?
we
So
have to,
Robin,
but Mike, don't we have to specify that that's for 1 quarter?
She did, I think. She did say 1 quarter. I believe you did, Nancy.
Oh, okay, did you?
Somebody asked me if that was for 1 quarter. Where does it say it has to be for 1 quarter?
Up to 12 months. So anyway, between 1 quarter and 12 months, up to you. You can make it a whole year if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, just has to be for a period of less than 1 fiscal year. I'd say that.
Correct. The theory of that is you're trying to get past a provision where you can actually hold a FTR.
Right.
But if we did it for a year, Nancy, you're realizing we wouldn't have an FTR.
No, less than 1 fiscal year.
Right. So yeah, right. So you have to pick the time frame. We have to pick the time frame. Could be 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, or 4 quarters, or less than that.
So
Trish,
yes, Denise.
Nancy, I would agree with this if you just go for 1 quarter and we try to have the FTR between now and October. And then after October, we'll have the correct tax rate and go on from there. Is that what you meant?
That is what I mean. If the assumption is that 1 quarter will get to that point where we.
Hello.
Okay, all right.
I think.
Hi, Tony.
Tony, I'm talking.
Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, Tony.
So I think realistically, between now and October, we'd be able to have the FTR. The budget committee will know what our revenue, hopefully by then, make a budget, and I think that it's realistic to say between now and October, we could pull this off. I wouldn't want to go any further than October.
Let me ask you this, if it turns out, well, I agree with you, Denise, I think that probably is realistic. If it turns out we're off by a few, we could always motion to continue it, right?
Correct.
Well, we'd have to ask Mike that, but I would think.
I think he said yes.
Up to a
Okay.
year. So
Okay.
can we just clarify the motion? I know Mr. Clark has, can we just put the motion in play so we know what we're talking about so that we can have a discussion?
Thank you.
Okay. So Nancy, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Your motion is to exercise option B1 under H8015 and to issue the tax bill not under the prior fiscal year levy up to 1 quarter and continue the appropriation for 1 quarter. That's the motion?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I believe that was seconded by Ms. Medeiros, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Thank you. That's the
Okay.
motion. Thank you, Stephen.
All
Okay,
right.
so there was a motion. Is that other motion withdrawn?
It was never
Well, I don't-
seconded. It was never seconded.
I don't think the other motion was very clear, Nancy, and so she clarified it.
Okay.
Steve,
Just for the record, I did second the initial motion because I understood that it was for 1 quarter.
I'm sorry, Stephen.
Let's make sure we have this on the record correctly.
I'm sorry, Stephen.
It
That's
is
my, I
1
didn't.
quarter, correct?
right,
Yes.
for 1 quarter. So that's so there's
now
a
we're gonna-
motion in a second. Now we can have some discussion if anybody has more questions. Anybody? Chris?
So I have Tony Lynn, the tax collector, on as well, and I'll get there in a minute. There is slightly an issue with the pair of the tax bills, but I'm working with the league now to see if we can get that resolved. I think it would be a preference for some to do the whole year so that the information gets loaded up into the system. But even if we wound up doing 2 separate types of tax bills, my suggestion is with vision that we do what I would call a supplemental early. In other words, we do 1 tax bill, even if they had to print all 4 quarters, if we had to rip out 3 stubs. But it's going to create a lot of work for both probably the assessor and the tax collector. But I think we've always said all along that all we wanted to do, to the best of our ability, was to do this for 1 quarter and then have the FTR and then set an appropriate tax rate after the FTR and then do the other 3 quarters under the new rate and do an adjustment as a credit for what was done for the 1st quarter. So that's just what I just wanted to bring you up to speed on where we were with this. But I also want to let Tony Lynn speak if the council is so interested in listening to her.
Okay, I'll get to Tony Lynn. Denise has got her hand up. Hold on 1 second, Tony.
Chris, so my understanding is the first tax bill would be what last year's quarter would be. And then once we figure out the levy, then the next 3 would be the correct tax bill.
So I'm going to clarify just a little bit. It will be close to what the 1st quarter was last year.
Right.
Because there's been a little bit of growth in town since January, from December 31st till now, the tax rate would actually go lower. So if it was, I want to say it was 1579, it would go down to 1565, according to Dave Robert. But we wouldn't be taxing any more than what we did for the 1st quarter of last year.
All right, I think that would be the best option because I think you're just going to confuse the taxpayer if you send them out 4 quarters and like you just said, it's going to be a decrease in their taxes. And then all of a sudden we set another levy, do a budget and then say, well, this wasn't right. This is going to be your additional bill. I think it would be very confusing to taxpayers why this happened. And I think it would cause a problem.
So Tony Lynn is also going to put in a filler that would explain some of this to the taxpayers.
Yeah, but I don't think that people, quite honestly, when I know through my experience, some people won't read that filler. They'll think that's what their tax bill is for a year. And I think it's very misleading. And I think if we just send 1 quarter out and then put a filler in there because they are going to read it because they're going to say, well, why did I only get 1 quarter? And that would make them read the filler more than likely. And then send the tax bills out that way. I think you're going to confuse people. I think it's going to cause some problems.
Yeah.
Tony Lynn, did you want to
Hang on,
address the council?
I'm unmuting her. There you go. Whoop. hang on, trying.
Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me?
Yeah, now I can hear.
Okay,
Hi,
all right.
hi, Tony Lynn, do you want to address the council?
I do, if I could, please. The problem with sending out a bill for 1 quarter only is that our software company has told us that they are unable to do this. So there has to be a tax roll for me to apply the funds. It's not sending out a piece of mail that has 1 quarter on it. It's that I need to have a tax roll to apply these funds to accurately apply the funds. And without a tax, they're saying they can only roll over the taxes like on an annual basis. They can do a revised roll, but I need a full year roll. And then I would have the ability to apply a quarter tax bill to that roll. So we would in essence have to level fund the 2020 tax roll to be equivalent to the 2019 tax roll. That would put a receivable in my software, which is what the software company is saying they can do. You have a question on that?
Could we have another printer just print out those, the first quarter, have somebody else do it?
It's not a matter of having, anyone can print a bill that has a quarter on it. I need a place to apply this money.
I don't
So,
understand.
in our system right now, we only have 2019 as a tax year receivable. So if we send out, I'm just going to use the scenario of a $4,000 tax bill because it's an even number. If we send out a tax bill to a taxpayer for $1,000, which would be the equivalent of 1 quarter of their taxes, I need a tax roll to apply that $1,000 to. Or it's going to be sitting in limbo, and I'm really not sure how accounting wise I'm going to account for all of this money. I need to have each taxpayer have a line item with a 2020 budget on it, even if that's the equivalent of the 2019. Where will we apply these funds?
So the vendor doesn't have a solution for this.
No, the vendor is willing to roll over to a 2020 tax year, the equivalent of the 2019 tax year. So it would be a very similar bill. The taxpayer would get a very similar bill. We could ask the taxpayer on the insert to only pay the first quarter, but there needs to be a tax roll to apply the funds to. So just issuing a quarter tax bill without a 2020 tax roll, I don't know how the funds are going to be applied.
And well, let me ask a question, Tony Lynn. Even if we did that, we'd still end up with a supplemental tax bill. So what would they do then?
They could issue a revised bill. So when we actually have an approved budget, a second bill would go in the mail, and that would replace, we'd have to write, this replaces your first. So in the $4,000 bill scenario, the new bill is now $4,400. What the taxpayer would get on the second bill would be a bill that would show their $1,000 credit, which was their first quarter payment. And then it would show remaining $100 due on their first quarter. And then their second, third, and fourth quarter would all be the $1,100. So then in October, the taxpayer would pay the revised bill, and it would show the credit on it. And then the first roll would be considered a preliminary roll, and that one would go away.
John?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, because I think we've had this discussion before, a vast majority of our tax bills are coming in from, mortgage companies, right? Where people are paying into an escrow account and then paying these out. How quickly, do you think that we're going to be able to have these revised numbers? Because there is some planning that needs to go on for each individual taxpayer to be able to know what to increase their escrow amount by, in the first quarter, just to make sure that they're not going to get caught, flat-footed.
I think that's part of the problem with doing it this way, is that no matter what you say, if you send out a tax bill with 4 quarters on it, with 4 sets of numbers on it, that's what people are going to plan for.
Is that what the mortgage company is going to plan for? That's really the key is whether or not the mortgage company is going to get this in a reasonable amount of time to be able to up the escrow amounts.
Chris, do you think that there's a solution for this? Because I really feel strongly that I don't want to send people out 4 quarters worth of a tax bill, knowing that only 1 quarter of them is right. And then the other 3 quarters, people are just going to be really confused or dismayed or something else. Do you think that there's a solution for this? Another question I have about all of this is that how much, if the vendor can only do it that way, how much are we going to have to pay the vendor? Because I know we set aside a certain amount of money every year for the tax bills. If they're saying that they're going to send out 4 quarters first, and then they're going to have to send out another 3 quarters later, how much is all that going to cost us? Because that's going to get expensive. Chris, Nancy, just let Chris answer and then I'll get to you.
So I'm working with Peter Schaefer, who knows the owner of the business, and he believes that they will work with us to get this done the way that we want, the way that the council has suggested. I know it's going to create a lot more work. The issue is that it's also compounding that is if you did what Tony Lynn's suggesting and you had a $100 increase in the first quarter, I mean, we still have to get to the issue of waiving the interest and the rest of it. But more importantly, because we're going to be late, we're also going to have to push the due date of the amount of payments back a little bit too, so that people can get paid, we can get the money in here timely. I think that we'll have hopefully an answer within the next couple of days. So I would probably rest on this at this point, the way that the council has suggested it, and try to see if we can work our way through it.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Nancy?
You know, this is an unusual event, and it's everything we're discussing is an unusual result of everything people have been living through, changes in their life. I think we can't dismiss the necessity of having a real public relations outreach so that people understand what's going on, and that this is unusual, and you know, their first tax bill they're going to get will not be what they're going to get for 2, 3, and 4 quarter, and they need to understand. I mean, this is unusual, but I think if they understand and you bring them in so that they understand what's going on, I think that'll help.
I do think it would help. I would like to see also vendors got their software and they've got everything else, but you know, I mean, these are really unusual times, and I would like to see the vendors step up to the plate and try and help us here, because I think it's just going to confuse people to get a 4 quarter tax bill, and then and then they're getting another set of tax bills later on. Denise?
I agree. I think the vendor needs to work with us. We've worked with them for quite some time, and I think they need to work with us. It doesn't sound like, I mean, I don't know a lot about this, but this doesn't seem like an impossible problem at all. And I don't know why they can't.
I've also offered to pay them to rewrite the software for us.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering, like, is there a way we can do something about the software?
It is going to cost us money no matter what, whether we did this 1 quarter or we did 2 quarters. We are still going to have to send out 2 sets of tax bills at some point.
Right.
And we are going to put that charge against the FEMA and the COVID-related monies that the governor has. Whether or not she ever pays it will be an issue that we'll chase down. But this is the most appropriate way that, in order to put for the taxpayers, I think that we should try to work with the vendor to get to an appropriate solution. It's loading the tax bills for 1 quarter and 1 quarter only. We'll have to load them again for the next 3 quarters. I just think it's a software issue, not a mechanical issue.
Is there, I know Denise is next, I'll wait.
No, it's okay, Donna, go ahead. I already spoke.
Thank you. I was just wondering with the 1 quarter tax bill, if it's possible to just put a little flyer in there so that they understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, was that there would be an insert that explained this. And I think, to Denise's point, if you only get a 1 quarter tax bill, you might actually read it, because you're going to be going, where's the rest of my things? Denise?
Well, I was going to ask you, Chris, because I thought that we could probably put this as a COVID expense and somehow get some kind of reimbursement for this.
Yeah, well, we will put it in for that. I just also want to let you know, because I don't know if you can see or not, but Denise Surratt is also on the call, and she would like to speak as well.
Denise Surratt?
Hang on, let me unmute her.
Steve has a question.
Oh, Steve, why don't you go ahead while we're waiting for Denise?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's humorous that the vendor or the software is kind of driving the bus here. But I know that's the way it goes in a lot of things these days. But I did hear something that appealed to me, and maybe it makes sense, is that the level funding idea is just keep the tax levy where it is so that people are getting the same tax bill as they were before, because people are unlikely to complain very much if their taxes stay the same. If anything, they're going to think, oh, wow, this is good. And then if at the end of the 4 quarters we end up with a surplus, that's good too. Now, it should be, managed with good communication like Donna and Denise are talking about. But I think if we did that level funding idea, or keeping the levy where it is for the next 4 quarters, for the next fiscal year, that then we circumvent this whole issue with the vendor and the billing and then changing the amount and all of that.
Well, I think, Steve, the issue is that if we do that, but we don't get as much money from the state in education aid as we're projecting, or as we're hoping for, then we are still, whatever we allocate to the schools, we are responsible then to that commitment. So that's the hard part, is that if we say, well, we're going to stay where we are for the year and state education aid comes in $500,000 less, we will still need to give the school what was committed to them. And that means we have to take it out of the municipal budget.
All right, just quickly, that's going through my mind, is that we're going through all of this and we don't even know what the state's going to do yet. It seems like we're ourselves.
That's kind of the idea. Denise?
Steve, what you're suggesting is not to have the FTR then, and just fix the budget as a town.
I'm suggesting not having the FTR. I'm suggesting that we keep the tax bill or the levy the same.
Yeah, but
Not sure that works, but that's what I was suggesting.
Right, but then we wouldn't have to have the FTR, because what are they going to vote for? It's kind of, it's like it's taking it out of the hands of the citizens, and I don't agree with that.
Madam President, Steve, the rationale for option B1 is to allow it up to a year, assuming that we couldn't have an FTR because of either a crisis or people were sick or whatever. So if you're gonna go that route, my suggestion would be to just have the council pass a whole new budget themselves under option 2, which I know that this council does not want to do. So that's I'm just explaining the policy differences between the two options. I'm not suggesting.
Right. That's what I was trying to say.
Correct.
If you do it, all due respect to Steve, but if you do it that way, then you are opting out not to have the FTR. That's the way I understand it.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, Chris, and then let's see if we're ready for a vote on this.
So we also have Denise Surratt, who had asked to speak as well too, but to Steve's point, and I just want to make this abundantly clear, and I know we get lost in the weeds a little bit. We're somewhat in a very, very bad predicament right now because we lost our gaming revenue. And we made a lot of cuts out of the $18 million of the total budget that the town is responsible for between April 1st and now. We are probably going to wind up with a balanced budget. But if we went with the same budget for next year, and there's a second wave, and we lose that revenue again, we would be decimated on the town side. We wouldn't have any money left. And there's no way that we can make up these cuts yet again. So we do need to have an FTR. We need to put a budget together that addresses all the revenue shortfalls and presents an appropriate budget for the taxpayers to vote on that will be sufficient with the revenues that we will have coming in next year. So I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or anything, but I think it's laudable to do the same levy, but it won't work if we have one more misstep with the gaming revenue again. So now, Denise, if you've got something you would like to.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
So I just have a couple of comments and a question. I just first want to clarify exactly what you're voting on. But one of my concerns, and in a perfect world, timing works the way we want it to, but my concern would be at this point, based on what you're voting on, having to have a public hearing, having to do this disclosure with the proper time frame, and then actually getting the data to the company to print the bills going out and extending the due date. I mean, it's already the end of June. So if you're looking at, normally taxpayers already have their bills. People have been calling up asking, where's my bill, and can I just pay my taxes without my bill, and that kind of thing. So that's my first concern, is the timing of it. My second concern, which again, in a perfect world, the state would get their budget done and we'd get our FTR done and everything would work perfectly. I'm just concerned that what if there is, who knows how long this is going to drag on? And if we start approaching August and early September, we're going to find ourselves in the same spot we're in right now with no money in October. So I just want to make sure that we're properly mapping out the time frame so that we don't find ourselves in a similar position.
So Denise, Denise Surratt, a part of this is that we have up till, although I think we'll have it done before, up to 65 days after the General Assembly adopts a fiscal budget to have our FTR. And we don't actually completely have to wait for the General Assembly to adopt the budget. There'll be a certain point where, it's pretty clear, that the school aid's pretty set. We've got a pretty good idea. We know, as a matter of fact, I think today they came out with the CARES funding that schools are getting. I mean, this is coming. This data is slow, but it's getting there. And, at a certain point, the council might just say, okay, we've got enough to go forward, but I think everybody understands that, I mean, frankly, the school committee's not going to be able to go back to school without a budget. So we've got to get this done. And I know that Chris is working closely with the league to get more information regarding the status of funding. And the casino revenue is a huge, who knows, because if you actually read that legislation, I'm not even sure that what they're doing now qualifies as part of a full fiscal year because it's not open 24/7. And, we may have to just accept the fact that unless the General Assembly rewrites that law, that we have no guaranteed casino revenue for this year either. Denise Medeiros wanted to say something.
Denise said something about a hearing. Am I to understand, and this is the way I understood it, no matter what we decide, we have to have a public hearing anyway?
Before the tax bills go out, sorry, yes.
Right, so no matter what we decide, there is a delay with the tax bill anyway, because even if we would send out 4 quarters of the tax bill, we'd have to have a public hearing first.
Yeah, that is correct. And so I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Treasurer. And so the reason why we need you to vote on what option you're going to choose, and then the second part is we're going to choose when that hearing date is, to make sure that we have enough time to get the tax bills out so we don't affect the cash flow. That's why we put it on our 2 questions.
Correct.
So are we ready to, we have a motion in a second. Are we ready to take a vote on that?
Yes.
Okay.
What is the motion, Trish?
It's basically that we're going to extend the levy and the existing tax rate for 1 quarter, for 1 fiscal quarter going forward.
Okay.
In the budget.
In the budget.
In the budget.
Not to exceed 90 days, 1 quarter.
1 quarter.
I have a question.
Yes, Denise?
When you say the same tax rate, I thought.
I'm sorry, I should clarify that. The tax rate, as Chris mentioned, will be recalculated. It might be slightly less than what it is today.
Okay.
But for purposes of general concept, the tax rate is not being recalculated based on a new levy. It's just going to be calculated on the existing levy. So it'll be pretty close to what we have. So, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Councilor Perry. Joe?
Yes.
Councilor Driggs?
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos?
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes,
and I'm a yes. Okay, so the next part of this is to set a public hearing date. How fast can we have a public hearing?
It's got to be advertised.
I could get it in Wednesday's paper.
It has to
which
be
is
advertised for 10 days.
24.
Before the hearing, yeah. At least 10 days before the hearing.
That includes weekends though, right? Just 10 days.
Correct. 10 consecutive days, yeah.
The 10 days would be on the 4th.
Fifth.
So
Oh.
that's a Saturday, then a Sunday, then Monday's a holiday. Looks like the first we could do is July 7th on a Tuesday, unless somebody's
Is
calculated.
July 4th a holiday or is the
4th
Monday
is
a holiday?
Saturday.
Oh, the 4th is Saturday. Okay.
Yeah, I thought the 3rd was the holiday.
No, we're following the federal government on the 6th, right? Or the
Where
state
I
government.
work, where I work, it's the 3rd.
Federal is the 3rd, state is the 6th.
So if it's actually advertised on the Wednesday, I mean, I'm thinking the Tuesday's the first day I can get. Do you agree with that, Mr. Solicitor?
I'm sorry, I'm looking. So the 10th day is actually July 5th, correct?
10th day would be July 4th, right?
If you advertise it tomorrow,
No, I can't advertise tomorrow. There's
no,
no,
Wednesday, right?
it will
so
come out Wednesday.
1, 2,
We
3,
call it
4,
a
5.
Thursday paper, but it's essentially available Wednesday.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
It's like the 4th to me.
Nancy,
When would the advertisement be in the paper? What date would it actually hit the paper?
It could hit the paper on Wednesday, the 24th.
Well, then it could. Will it hit the paper on Wednesday?
Some people get
Well, I
it.
hope so if you help me write the advertisement,
All
Mr.
right.
Solicitor.
All right. So
The
1,
paper-
2, 3.
It's a weekly paper and it comes out on Wednesday. So as long as.
Oh, yeah. So the 10th day is July 4th. You're correct.
Okay, so that's a Saturday.
Right. So you could have it anytime after July 4th,
7th.
the hearing.
So July 7th is the first available day?
Right.
Okay, so why don't we set it for July 7th? And in the meantime, though, there's no voting after this public hearing. The bill requires us to have a public hearing,
Correct.
but we're not, there's no vote. So essentially, the vote that we've taken now is the vote, which means that Chris can continue to work with Tony Lynn and get the process going.
Well, Madam Clerk, Madam President, the vote is actually to just adopt the levy and the appropriation. So there is a technical vote.
Oh, there is a technical
Yeah,
vote.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I ask a question then, what's the purpose of the public hearing?
Just to be as transparent as possible in case people think maybe people want us to go for a half a year instead of a 1 quarter, or to educate the people as to what the process is and why we're doing it and whatnot. So.
But it won't change the vote.
It won't change. Well, it could, I guess, if you guys change your mind after this, you could change your mind.
If
Yeah,
it
you technically could.
come to the public hearing, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so
You have that option. You don't have that option until you have the public hearing, but after the public hearing, you would have the option to change your vote. Maybe you would make it longer, shorter, or abandon the whole concept and do something differently.
So July 7th then is the public hearing.
Yep.
Okay, Denise?
not that it makes a big difference, but I just looked it up and the federal government is saying July 3rd is the celebration. It's not the 6th.
Follow the state. We follow the
you
state
said federal,
holiday
and federal is saying July 3rd.
Okay. We got more than enough days. We're more than 10 days if we do it on the 7th. So it's extra be safe. Good idea.
Okay, so, all right. And then, so we're moving on to item D, which is the
Oh,
declaration.
no, excuse me, hold on. Can we have the clerk, can we formally vote to have the clerk set the public hearing
set the
date
public
for
hearing?
yep,
Yes.
July 7th?
Is there-
At what time? At what time?
At 7 PM?
So Mike, can we add something to that?
Sure.
So by law, I think the council president has to do the disclosure for that public hearing. So we're going to pull last year's disclosure and just adjust the overall levy based on the current values. But that motion should allow the council president to publish that disclosure.
That's fine. And that would be last year's disclosure. And that's required by the statute as well.
Right, that has to be done 10 days prior to the hearing too.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, Solicitor Marcella, would you like to frame the motion for us?
Sure. The motion would be to instruct this town clerk, Ms. Mello, to advertise a public hearing under H 8015 for July 7th at 6 p.m.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Sorry, as well as to allow the town council president to sign the public disclosure requirements as required under the Municipal Budget Disclosure Act, which is referenced in the statute as well.
Okay. So would anyone like to?
So moved.
Thank you.
So
Easy.
moved. Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Okay. Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos,
Yes.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay. Moving on to item D, extension of Executive Order 2020-01, declaration of state of municipal emergency. Mike, you want to?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is on the agenda again. This is the solicitor's mistake. When we passed the original Executive Order 2020-01, declaring the state of emergency, originally had an expiration date of March 13th, and I thought that we had extended it, but it never actually amended the actual executive order. But in looking through the minutes, Councilor Edwards at the I think the March 17th meeting made a motion to the following motion to extend the to allow the executive order declaring a municipal emergency to remain in full force and effect until amended or repealed by the town council president with notice to the town council and town clerk within 24 hours of any amendment or repeal. So we don't need to extend this because it's already, unless the council president has exercised her right to end it, she has not, and she's acting within her full authority to extend it. So this remains in full force.
Was that a unanimous vote, Mike?
It was 6-0. 6-0.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, this was put on error. I was being overly cautious because of the statutory requirements, but it's there.
Okay.
Madam President, I have a quick question.
Yes, John.
So for the solicitor, there was another executive order that put a moratorium on burning of brush, and I was curious as to whether or not we had expired that, or if there were any other executive orders that have expired, or if they all fall under this.
No.
This
So
structure.
this one just this one that we just read not only declared a municipal emergency but had other provisions in it. This morning I worked on an executive order that cleans up, and some of them are expired and some of them are not. So we did suspend. Well, we will suspend once it's signed. The council president just got it late this afternoon. She'll have to look it over. But there were other things that will be continued and other things that will be expired and other things that will be repealed. Just so you know, the way I drafted it, and I haven't had a chance to talk to the council president yet because she did get it late, nor the town administrator. But we're basically now going to follow we're the phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 program that the governor has, so we don't have to keep on renewing these things.
We're basically sort of saying we're just going along with whatever the state has for their things.
Unless
So
the council
clarify-
wants to do otherwise, yeah.
So to clarify, can I burn my brush pile now?
Once it's signed, you can.
But you will need a permit from the fire department.
Of course.
Denise.
John, they're giving out fire permits. They're giving out burning permits. They've done it for about 2 weeks now. There's people burning in my neighborhood.
I've been overly cautious.
Well, I think that one actually had an expiration date on it, so it's expired in the
Okay.
fire department and stuff. But
People
we're gonna just clean it up so everybody knows. Joe?
If you're cooking marshmallows or hot dogs, don't get it. Just put a marshmallow on a stick and put it, you're all set.
Thank you, Joe. Okay.
You provide the marshmallows, Joe.
Okay. Nancy?
Yeah, full disclosure, I had emailed Mike earlier because when I had a chance to finally read the whole House bill, there were some questions raised just on verbiage, which I'm not entirely satisfied with that he got what I was thinking about. But one of the major things that I did raise as a question, and I guess I still sort of have it, is, you know, if the state declares an emergency, that covers all the cities and, you know, they're all subject to that state emergency. So something you just said, Patricia, reminded me, you know, why do we have to do sort of mimicking executive orders to just follow what the state has already said? I mean, we're subject to what the state is doing. We're subject to phase 1, we're subject to phase 2. And I just don't understand what the purpose of having town executive orders are. Yes.
But I think the solicitor would have liked to answer that, so go ahead.
So when the governor issued her initial executive order, she also gave the cities and towns the authority to go farther than what her executive order was. In other words, have more restrictions than what she did. For instance, the thing that comes to mind is we did not allow flea markets to open within our town because we had a special flea market issue here. So we were able to put in more restrictions than what she wanted, and so that's why we did it. That's why, and she asked for dual, and she allowed towns to go have further restrictions, greater restrictions than what the state imposed. But you're correct. The state of emergency is a straight up emergency.
But that could have been just a limited, you know, we follow the state, except town of Tiverton is not going to allow flea markets.
We could have done it that way, but in retrospect, we probably would have been a lot easier, so we wouldn't have to write so many. But we didn't do it that way. That's why.
And honestly, Nancy, neither did many other communities. And at the time, the state was actually encouraging us to, take what they'd had, adopt it as is, or if we had special circumstances that they hadn't covered. So everybody was kind of doing this because the state was actually encouraging us to do that and then asking us to send them copies of theirs. So
I really have an issue with, and I don't have anything to back it up, but there's just something that doesn't make any logical sense to me, that 30, whatever the thing that gives the state the right, the towns and cities to have the chief executive officer issue their emergency orders, that somehow they are at the same level as the governor. That's just nuts. That's nuts.
Well, I've given you a legal memo on that, and that ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Well, I don't buy this coterminous stuff. I just don't.
Okay.
You told me that Patricia could now.
We're getting a little off. First of all,
no. But all I'm saying is,
Nancy, we're getting a little off topic here. Number one. And number two, we've debated this before. Our solicitor has handed out a multi-page written legal opinion based on our charter. And I can understand that you don't agree with it, but we've already actually had this debate at the council table, and we are pretty far off of our agenda. So I'd like to go back to our agenda, if that's okay, and move along to announcements, comments, and discussions. Item A, the town solicitor, Faulkner v. Tiverton, release of all claims.
Just to let the council know that we finally did get a signed release from Mr. Faulkner, and the monies that had been previously appropriated have been to settle the case have been paid by the town. Thank
you. Interim town solicitor Carter, we don't have anything listed for Administrator, or did I? Sorry. And finally, town clerk, process for declaration and nomination papers for the November election.
I just want everyone to know that the declaration period for filing candidacies was today, Monday, the 22nd, Tuesday, the 23rd, and Wednesday, the 24th at 4:00 ends deadline. If you are bringing in your declarations, as long as you've signed it, someone else can bring it in for you. The main town council doors are unlocked. We have a Board of Canvass clerk sitting there with appropriate COVID protections, and she immediately will take it, clock it in, give you a copy, have you sign off for your campaign packets. And it's only a matter of 3 or 4 minutes and you'll be back out the door. The door is unlocked only for the candidacy, but you don't need an appointment. Just come up and go to the main door and walk right in.
Nancy, is there a notary there?
A notary?
Yeah,
It doesn't need to be notarized.
declarations for town committees do.
No, they don't.
No.
I thought
No.
they did.
No.
Nothing needs Notary.
Okay.
When you, the nomination papers with the signature papers, I don't know if they've changed that form, that generally has a notary, but the declaration of candidacies does not need a notary.
And also the nominate, for anyone that is declaring for an office or the town committee doesn't, if they're endorsed, does not need signatures. But anyone that is applying for a local office or a representative or a senator, nomination papers are going to be available June 30th. And we'll follow the exact same process. You'll come in, sign off for them. You just use that front door. It'll be unlocked and you can just go in. There'll be a clerk sitting right at the door. We are not taking other.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
We're not taking anyone for any other departments. You still have to call if you want to do a recording or a vital record, but you will use the clerk entrance for that.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Nancy. So that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and we're going to do a roll call by hand vote for this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did I hear you? Yes.